Arc 7 Chapter 38 8-year-old reward TL, shucks plus check C. Abel pisses me off. That slogan, Subaru thought, was the best way to deal with the extremely colorful Yorana Misiga. After all, she had been accused of repeated rebellions, and even Zykel, a man of character, had branded her as a person with a desire for destruction. In requesting a meeting with her, Subaru's policy was that an appropriately powerful person wanted to talk to her privately in order to rebel against the current emperor of Volika. Subaru and the three of them came to the Red Rory Castle with a letter of intent from that person in power. To be honest, they didn't tell a single lie. The current emperor of Volika was none other than the one who ousted Abel and snatched his name and position. The appropriate authority who wanted to talk to us privately was also the real emperor who was supposed to be sitting on the throne. So their words were true. The goal of Subaru and the others was to get the letter from Abel. If necessary, they will tell as many lies as they could. Subaru, this is what Natsumi Schwartz's scheme is all about. This is what Natsumi Schwartz is all about. But, Yorana, rebels against you. Huh? The air in the hall cooled as the trick he had told Yorana was revealed. The one who exudes a hostility that could be mistaken for cold air was the person who has been the most heated in this place since a while ago. Vincent's bodyguard, Kahuma Lilix. The sternness of his gaze made Subaru realize that a quiet exit from this place was no longer possible. I've never felt these words so true as I do now, when I'm drowning in my own scheming. Subaru, but the bad pause and lack of information sharing are not both Abel's fault, are they? Kahuma, keep that mouth shut. General Yuana I. Kahuma silenced Subaru, who was now in an absurd predicament and cursing Abel. As he did that he thrusted his steely gaze forward to Yorana. Kahuma, did you knowingly allow His Excellency and these things to be present? Yorana, Kahuma, I demand an answer. Kahuma raised his voice, his anger directed not at the increasingly tense Subaru and the others, but at Yorana for creating this batting situation. It was not because the blame lies with Yorana. More simply, it was a sign that they did not see Subaru and the others as a threat. In fact, the fighting spirit coming from Kahuma, who stood up bravely, gave Subaru a taste of the same kind of threat as the strong man Narakiyo encountered at the city hall in Geralt. At the very least, there was no doubt that he was capable enough to be ordered to accompany the Emperor. From his point of view, it was probably inevitable that Subaru, of course, would be judged as unworthy of caution, even Al and Medium. Al, you're a party to this, but you're not part of it. Is that good or bad? The tense exchange continued, leaving Subaru and the others in the dark as Al blurted out his sympathy. Yorana, who was being questioned by Kahuma, put her mouth on her smoking pipe and exhaled purple smoke. Then she tilted her head, shaking her bright hair ornament and said, Yorana, what do you mean, knowingly? Kahuma, don't be so naive. As I have advised you many times, you are still dangerous. Yorana, you're saying the obvious. I'm sure you're aware of the many wrongs I've committed. Kahuma, KH. A blue streak appeared on Kahuma's forehead at Yorana's attitude that could only be considered a provocation. Strangely enough, Subaru's opinion also leaned towards Kahuma's as far as the exchange was concerned. To be honest, even from Subaru's perspective, Yorana's character was the worst. He thought he was prepared for it from his previous reputation, but it was worse than I expected. However, it seemed that she was not simply planning to offer the rebels to Vincent and the others who happened to be in the area. The atmosphere was too tense for a scene in which a rebel was to be presented to the Emperor. Above all, Vincent, it's still in repulsive bad taste, isn't it? Vincent said, cutting off Yorana's taste. At Vincent's cold words, Yorana raised her bushy eyebrows slightly. Yorana, oh, you don't like it, do you, my lord? Vincent, number. If it's too one-sided, it's like letting a rabbit hunt the dog. I have not grown tired of the Empire to the point of making mere cruelty an amusement. Vincent's statement was plain, but with a certain authority. Yorana's fox ears quivered in the gap between her tied hair as she coolly accepted it. It was hard for Subaru to see what kind of emotion was being expressed by this, but it was the same for Vincent's mind. Vincent, what kind of storm was brewing in Vincent's mind when he was confronted face to face with the rebels? It was more difficult to understand the inner thoughts of a rebel when you knows that the person in front of you was a fake emperor than it was to imagine what the real emperor was thinking. The fake one feels bad about Abel because he drove him away, but Subaru, you can't be dumb enough to let that show. Vincent, you, Subaru, eh? Vincent's black eyes pierced straight through the gasping Subaru. Forbidden to look away, he stared at his enemy, unprepared. How did he make the face of the real one and the fake one so similar? Both the real and the fake had the same sharp black eyes that tried to see through everything. This made Subaru's heart itch. Vincent, if you have something to say to me, you can say it. Subaru, your eyes are so annoying. Vincent, wah. Subaru, oh, no, it's not like that. That was just unintentional momentum. At the most inopportune time, the fake emperor's question coincided with a leak of indignation. Kahuma exclaimed in a completely unexpected face at the head-on abuse of the Emperor. When Subaru waved his hand in panic, Vincent closed one eye and fell silent. He was surprised, but at the same time, he looked at Subaru as if he were evaluating him. It was the same kind of look that the real Abel had given Subaru in the Badheim jungle, in the Shudra settlement, and even in the city hall of Geralt. Subaru. Anyway, we're behind him. Alan and Medium were also watching the situation with bated breath. Subaru's shocking outburst must have put them both under a lot of pressure. The air in the hall was chilled and tense, and one more gaffe would have shattered it into pieces. In the first place, the situation they were in was too painful. He didn't think that Yorana or even Kahuma was someone that Subaru and the others could compete with. If that was the case, it would be better to retract the opinion they had expressed to Yorana, bow their heads and say that they were not insurgents, and leave the place even if it made the situation worse. So, Subaru made up his mind, and loosened the corners of his mouth to make an amiable smile. He noticed Yorana's gaze watching him. Yorana, as she sipped her pipe. Yorana silently watched Subaru's movements. It was a very ambiguous gaze that was neither indifferent nor indifferent, uncertain as the rising purple smoke. It was like an illusion that was vanishing. Even if you tried to grasp it, it would be foolish at heart to try to rely on it. However, Subaru had a hunch that this was a watershed. That gaze, which was on the verge of losing interest in Subaru and the others, was not drunk enough to think of regaining what it had once given up. An opinion discarded here could never be scooped up again. In other words, he would never be able to get Yorana Misiga's cooperation again. That was synonymous with closing the road to an unreliable victory in the dark. Hence, Vincent, answer me with all your heart. Tell me what you are going to tell me, Subaru. It's Vincent's question took too long to be called a beat, and he looked up. The false emperor's eyes narrowed, and the Kohuma at his side turned his attention to Subaru. In the background, Alan Medium's tensions swelled, and Yorana's lungs held the purple smoke in her mouth. With these changes out of the corner of his eye, Subaru looked at Vincent and said, Subaru, it's like Yorana-sama said, we're declaring war on you. Yes, as if clinging to a pawn that must not be withdrawn, must not be conceded. Rem, who was waiting for him in Geralt, Abel, who was not here, and Alan Medium, who was standing behind him, left the decision to Subaru. In order for Natsuki Subaru not to misunderstand the meaning and weight of this, and not to throw it away. Vincent's black eyes wavered slightly as he was told of the hostile situation head-on. However, Subaru's insight could not decipher which emotion corresponded to joy, anger, sorrow, or pleasure. However, he could feel his tongue rapidly thirsting for the heat of my words. It was no wonder. The emperor of the vast Volca Empire, unlike Abel who had lost his real power, the fake emperor in front of him was the one who had indeed grasped the contradiction. In fact, if Vincent hadn't raised a small hand to stop him, Kohuma would have exploded upon hearing his outburst and Subaru's life would have been scattered. But it didn't happen, and Vincent didn't let it happen. Yorana, Q for Fufu. Yorana looked down from her seat above at the confrontation between Subaru and Vincent, and cleared her throat slightly. Smoke leaked from the corner of her mouth in a chuckle, and her shoulders shook in sheer amusement. Apparently, Subaru's life-threatening pronouncement had at least had the effect of distracting her from her boredom. Vincent, what are you laughing at? Yorana Misiga. Yorana, first of all, your guests have not retracted their mouths. In addition, the three of them may be endangering His Excellency's life. What do you think, Vincent? I'm sure you understand my intentions, even though you believe in disobeying me. Vincent responded to Yorana's provocative look without changing his expression. As it was, he reflected Subaru's hostility in his dark eyes once again. Vincent, this is the land of the sword wolves. It is only when you have the guts to go for this head that you can truly be called an imperial citizen. Subaru, you're very kind, aren't you? Vincent, sniffling. Vincent laughed off Subaru's sarcasm. Vincent's behavior, including his response, was a genuine and complete trace. If Abel were here, he would have responded exactly the same way. He even suspected that Abel with Subaru and the others could be the false emperor. In that case, Subaru and the others would be in a complete bind. Vincent, however, the value of my head is not so cheap that I can easily give it to you guys. Subaru, well, then what do you intend to do with us? Vincent, that's the question. A statement that acknowledged Subaru and the others who had shown outright rebellion against the emperor by controlling Kohuma, who was on the verge of a violent outburst. However, if you took back the words that follow, there was no change in the cold gaze that they gave to their opponents. Even if their spirit was bought, they would have no reason to do anything to those who wanted to harm them. The air in the room burned as Subaru and Vincent's dark eyes met. Yorana, oh, I'm a guilty woman, too. When I see men fighting over me like this, I feel like I'm on fire. Kohuma, it's like someone else's problem. First of all, there are more women there. You're missing the point with the men. Yorana commented, feeling terribly out of place at Subaru and Vincent's staring contest. She cleared her throat mockingly at the irritated Kohuma's point. Kohuma's face grew increasingly angry at her reaction. Kohuma, my lord, command yourself. Sir, take those two. Kohuma, you know what? You've been talking too much for too long. Fed up with the stalemate, Kohuma tried to appeal directly to Vincent. However, it was not Vincent or Yorana who interrupted him, but someone else. Subaru. A gasp escaped from Subaru's mouth as he turned his attention to the source of the voice. The owner of the voice was so far outside of Subaru's consciousness that the very fact that it had spoken startled him. It was a small figure sitting on the wooden floor. Apart from Kohuma, one of the three people Vincent had brought with him as his bodyguard. You know, most things come together better when you're thinking than when we can think too, and we'd be in the way if we were whispering. Really? The man who said this was a wrinkled old man with white-colored hair and long eyebrows. The tone and content of his speech were carefully crafted to convey an air of annoyance. If you looked at him, he had a very impressive appearance, and he didn't know why he didn't see him before. Perhaps, in the true sense of the word, he was out of sight. When the old man pointed this out to him, Kohuma turned around and said, but, Kohuma, it is the duty of a loyal vassal to relieve you of your troubles. Master Olbart, if you call yourself a loyal vassal, doesn't that sound like a prelude to someone being purged for being selfish? I don't like the idea of chopping off the head of a promising young man. Kohuma, shaking his head lazily. The old man, the one they call Olbermann, picked at his ear holes and Kohuma's cheeks tensed up, wondering how much pressure he felt from that gesture. However, Kohuma wasn't the only one who felt his cheeks tense. When Subaru heard the name he had mentioned, her cheeks tightened as well. Subaru, Olbart, oh, you know me, right? I'm pretty famous. Subaru, yes. If you're aware of your celebrity, you must be. His lips quivered as I spun the name, and Olbart reacted. He was pretty sure that's how he reacted after seeing Subaru's surprise. He heard Olbart's name at the city hall in Geralt, and then on the way to the Magic City. In the future, when Subaru and his team attacked the Empire, they will inevitably have to deal with the 9 divine generals. One of them is Yorana, and Subaru, Olbart Dunkulakan, the vicious master. Olbart, I don't like that name very much. Vicious old man is too much. I don't think I look like such an evil old man. Well, if you were to ask me directly, I wouldn't be able to say that I do. I can't tell you that. The old man opened his his mouth wide and smiled, showing off his white teeth, which were well grown for his age. But Subaru can't bring himself to laugh after encountering Vincent, the fake emperor, for the purpose of getting Your Honor on his side. He had Olbart with him. This meant that Olbart was also a member of that side at this point, didn't it? Subaru, Arakiyo, Shisha, and Olbart a broken bar. Subaru wanted to hold his head in his hands at the thought of aiming at the 9 divine generals that were already taken by the enemy and were considered to be of high rank. The problem is not only the future, but also the situation in front of us is getting worse at an accelerated rate. Kahuma alone was out of control, and now Olbart, one of the 9 divine generals, had joined the fray. The bad conditions at this point. It's not something one can just align by hoping. Hey, old man, do you remember me? Olbart, what's that? The sweat on his forehead trickled down his cheeks and dripped from the tip of his chin. In the midst of all this tension, a voice unexpectedly made Olbart raise his eyebrows. Whoever it was Al, who had reached out from behind Subaru. Al leans forward, and Subaru's eyes widen in surprise at his action. Al, Subaru, what are you doing? A broken bar. All of a sudden, we're in a situation where our every move is being questioned. Al, I'm not the only one who has a problem with that. It's not that I didn't think about it. Beat a broken bar. Old man, it's me, Oreo. Subaru, it's like some kind of scam. It would be imprudent to think that just because the other party is an old man, his scam-like speech will work. In fact, in response to Al's call, Olbart leaned forward and snorted. Tilda, Olbart, well, that's quite an eccentric look you've got there, son. Even though I'm an old man, I wouldn't be able to forget someone who looks like that. Do you and I really know each other? Al, I may not know you that well, and the last time I saw you, I wasn't wearing a helmet, but I didn't have an arm, and we talked a bit. Olbart, the armless a broken bar that talked to me? Al, oh, yeah, Miss Arakiyo, she was with me, too. In a slightly lowered voice, Al mentioned the name of Arakiyo, the fearsome girl who, like Olbart, was a 9 divine generals and who had stirred up Subaru and the others. Al's words were completely inconceivable to Subaru, but as soon as he heard them, Olbart's eyebrows shot up and he exclaimed, oh, Olbart, you're that guy, the guy who took back the island with Araki. Now that you mention it, you look just like him. I can't believe you're still alive. Al, oh, I'm alive. Somehow the stars have turned full circle. Olbart, so, for some reason, you've become Your Excellency's enemy? Maybe I should have talked to you more at the time so that Your Excellency would be more reputable. I failed. Olbart is smiling broadly, and Al is exchanging words in an easygoing tone, unsure of the relationship between the two. Subaru could only stare blankly. He couldn't even tell if things are getting better or not. Vincent, Olbart, is that a face you know? It was Vincent who intervened, seeming to put an end to such questions. The false emperor crossed his arms, and Olbart replied, oh, yes, Olbart, a few years ago, when you had just ascended to the throne, there was a revolt that broke out all over the place. Wasn't there? Kahuma, Master Olbart, Your Excellency ascended to the throne 8 years ago. Broken bar. Olbart, huh? I thought it was about 3 years ago. It's been about 10 years, which seems recent to me. Vincent, just keep going. What happened 8 years ago? Vincent corrected Olbart, who was getting sidetracked every time he spoke. That's why, Olbart said, pointing to Al. Olbart, at that time, there was a rebellion in Jinyan High via Broken Bar, and the ones who stopped it were the guy with the helmet and Araki. Vincent, oh, listening to Olbart, Vincent's interest turned to Al for the first time. It was hard to tell which way the needle had swung, good or bad, but it seemed that his work did not immediately lead to a rude awakening. On top of that, Al took a step forward to stand alongside Subaru. Al, I'm afraid, Your Excellency, you know that old man Olbart over there Broken Bar. Actually, 8 years ago, I was supposed to be of service to Your Excellency, and I haven't received my reward yet. Olbart, he said he didn't want it, though. Vincent, shut up. Olbart, continue. Clown. Al, I wanted to get my reward today. Quietly, Subaru thought he heard the illusion of the air in the hall freezing. Fearlessly, Al demanded a reward for his own achievements after 8 years, with his stubbornness and the presence of someone who knew what he was doing. It was certainly a big game worth betting on. The false emperor who did not choose to immediately execute Subaru upon hearing his declaration of war. Vincent felt his reasons and determination to act as the emperor of Volca, and if Abel's words are true, then his beliefs include merit and punishment. Then Vincent, what do you want? My head? Al, if I could get you to give it to me, I'd be a gold star, but it would take a lot of courage to ask for it. So, as he said this, Al turned his head and looked at Subaru, realizing what was being asked of him. Subaru pulled out an envelope from his pocket. The purpose, of course, was to deliver a letter of intent containing Abel's message. Al, our purpose is to give this letter of intent to you, Your Honor Sama. If you would like to reward me for my companionship, please allow me to do so. Vincent, a letter of intent. Al, it is a love letter from our Lord of Broken Bar to Your Honor Sama. He hesitated to call him Lord, but inwardly held his tongue at the words that followed. Hearing the words love letter, Your Honor, who was sitting above him, laughed, Hufu, and cleared her throat. Her interest had been piqued, and Vincent's reaction was not bad either. Vincent's dark eyes narrowed, and he pondered for a few seconds. Vincent, it's been over 8 years, but the case on the isolated Gladiator Island, it was a big deal. Al, oh our Broken Bar. Vincent, I will reward you if you want it. That letter of intent, you may give it to Your Honor Misiga. With a twitch of his chin, Vincent indicates Your Honor. For a moment, it took me a moment to comprehend the intent of Vincent's words, but when they realized that it meant that Al had won his bet, Subaru and the others looked at each other. Al's decision to go for it in a big game of win or lose was the right one. Vincent, however, Subaru, huh? Just as they were about to raise their voices in joy, Vincent, holding up one finger, uttered a single word as Subaru and the others turned to look at him. The false emperor closed his dark eyes into a deep darkness and said, Vincent, the only thing I will allow you to do is to hand over the letter of intent. Do you know what that means? He said, as if biting into it. With that, Subaru's eyes widened and he quickly turned around, biting his back teeth, his gaze going to Yorana, who was looking at the situation with a grin. It is Subaru and his team's goal to give her a letter of intent and get a response from her. Though, Subaru, if we were to give her a letter of intent, when will we receive Yorana-sama's reply? Yorana, that's right, a broken bar, Subaru asked, and Yorana let her gaze wander into the void for a moment. Then she turned her pipe upside down, dropping the ashes into a jar provided by a bald man beside her, and began to smoke. Yorana, I don't want to be seen opening the seal of a love letter as soon as I receive it from a woman, a broken bar, so, after the guests leave my castle, I will take my time to read through it and reply. Vincent, you will read it when we leave the castle, right? Yorana, I will not tell falsehoods in front of the lord of this magical city and his attendants. The light in her blue eyes, whether it was sincere or childish, Subaru, who did not know her, could not judge. However, there was no way to choose anymore. For example, if he had changed the content of Al's reward and said that it was to leave the castle safely, Vincent would probably have let that pass as well. However, that idea would be the same as the previous one, and it would end the possibility of making a deal with Yorana. In other words, Subaru, Al, Medium-san. Before he could make up his mind, Subaru called out the names of the two people accompanying him. The cooperation of the two of them was essential for what was about to happen and what needed to be done. It was only logical that he should ask for their approval before taking any action. When Subaru looked back at them, Al and Medium both nodded. Al, well, I said I'd lend my brothers a hand. Medium, and Chan asked me to do it. Take care of Natsumi-chan. Al's head twisted, and Medium's gave him strong words. Encouraged by their answers, Subaru nodded back at them. Then, Subaru slowly walked to the front of the hall, to Yorana, who was leaning on her elbow in the upper seat, puffing on a cigarette. With her magical beauty close at hand, Subaru presented her with a letter of intent in the sweet scent of the air. Subaru, here you go, a letter of intent from our lord. Yorana, thank you for your efforts. However, it will be more difficult from here. Subaru, yes, I understand. A gentle finger takes the letter of intent, and words with a smile curses the future of Subaru and the others. However, Subaru responded to the words with dignity and turned round. And then Subaru, Your Majesty, I'm afraid we have to take your throne. And with that, he announced a straightforward declaration of war, even more clearly than before. A cubed A1 quarter A cubed A1 quarter A cubed A1 quarter A cubed. The events of the moment were dramatic. Kohuma, how dare you bark at me, you undeserving bastards. Straight after declaring war, Kohuma's eyes widened in response to Subaru's declaration, which was the ultimate in rudeness and disrespect. Kohuma Lux tried to prove his loyalty to the emperor with his own strength. As a result, Kohuma's jacket exploded as he stretched out his arms, and countless thorns rushed towards Subaru. The thorns, dark green in color, surged towards Subaru like slithering snakes, and their overwhelming mass covered his vision. The ivy of thorns, each of which has needles as thick as Subaru's arms, was a deadly force that squeezes its prey and squeezes the life out of it to the last drop. It's as if Subaru hadn't been allowed to react at all, and the blow was as easy as a snake swallowing a rat, taking its body into the thorns. Al, well said, bro. The thorns pierced his entire body, and he prepared himself for the fierce pain to come. However, what struck Subaru, who stiffened, was not pain, but the shock of being pulled back and falling on his buttocks, and Al's words as he stepped in front of Subaru and took the thorns with his blue dragon sword, while protecting Subaru behind him. Al was able to catch the enemy's attack with a thick blade that he pulled out. It was not possible to prevent all of them, and his shoulder and side were stained with blood. Even so, Al was able to protect Subaru from this overwhelming mass. Al, and what about Medium-san? Medium, that was so close. If I hadn't done what Al-chin said, I would have died right beside Subaru, who turned around in a panic. Medium, who had drawn her twin swords, answered loudly. Looking at her, she was holding her two twin swords up and down, slashing away, or catching, stepping on, and preventing some of the thorns that were coming at her from all directions. Subaru breathed a sigh of relief at her solid skills and the fact that she was safe. However, it was too early to be relieved. After all, this was only the first wave. Yorana, what an exaggerated magic trick. Subaru, what? Behind Subaru and the others, who were bracing themselves, was Yorana, who would have been included in the range of the thorns as well. She pulled the bald man into her arms in the posture in which she had received the letter of intent, and exhaled a cloud of purple smoke. There were traces of thorns closing in around her, but they avoided her as if they had been aimed at her, and the thorns twisted unnaturally, as if there was only a round space around Yorana. It was impossible to estimate whether Kohuma had bent it intentionally or if Yorana had done something to it. But Subaru, I apologize for the disturbance. We'll leave you to it. Yorana, have a safe trip home. If the three of you fail to leave the castle, please visit Kohuma. She won't read your letter of intent. I know that. I'm sure you can understand what Yorana is trying to do. No matter how hard you try to guess, Vincent dared to make it clear that the game this time, Subaru, the game that would last until we left the castle. Al, Medium-san. Al, oh, yeah, Medium, Subaru, to the right after the strong reply, Subaru barked loudly. Hearing this, the two companions immediately understood Subaru's decision, and three blades were wielded, a one-armed blue dragon sword and a flexible twin sword, which fiercely cut through the thorns, blew away the mass that blocked both their vision and their path, and the three figures flew out of the greenery. As they did, they stepped on the wooden floor, gaining speed and momentum. Kohuma, you don't think I'm going to let you get away with this? But, one step forward, and a needle as thick as a thumb snatches the tip of Subaru's nose. It was different from thorns, and in the moment it flashed across his vision. It looked like a piece of white bone. It was not a check on Subaru, but a blow that was supposed to penetrate his temple. If Al hadn't quickly inserted his blade into the path of the ejected needle, he would have died. Subaru, thorns and needles. You're a surprise. Medium, that's the bugbears. They attack with the insects they put inside their bodies. Subaru, it's not like they're the Abaram clan one. While arguing with each other, Subaru kept his stance low and moved forward with the support of Alan. Medium, the exit of the hall. He wasn't heading that way. Even if they headed that way, they'll have to make the long walk back to the keep. There was no way they could continue to be exposed to this Kohuma's attacks for that long. In other words, Subaru and the others would have to take a major shortcut. Hence Subaru, Medium-san. Subaru, hey, Subaru, good luck. Subaru, hang in there. The moment she received the cheers, without exaggeration, Medium's whole body bounced and her momentum increased. With her long hair flowing in the air, she swung the twin swords in her hands, fiercely dispatching the thorns that came at her in complicated and bizarre trajectories. Of course, this was due to Medium's own skill. But in addition to that, Al, right knee, nape of the neck, erotic hips, Medium, Doria. Al's blood-curdling scream alerted Medium to the looming danger. Medium instantly responded, successfully defending against the thorns just before they hit. He didn't know how much Al can see, but it seems that his high level of survivability, which was demonstrated even against Arikiyo, can be demonstrated not only on himself, but also on others. Taking advantage of this, Medium reached the window of the hall. With a single swing, she destroyed the wooden barrier, and her long, leaping legs blew down the wall. The hall of the castle keep, which was more than 30 meters above the ground, was opened up. The blue sky of the magical city spread out in full view, and the wind wildly greeted Subaru and the others. It's not a matter of win or lose, but Subaru, if we can get out of the castle. Yorana puts her hand on her letter of intent. As long as she accepts this condition, Vincent and the others will stop making any further moves. Perhaps, just perhaps, they might not have made such a promise explicitly, but since there was nothing else to believe in, that was the only way he could see Medium. Natsumi-chan, called by Medium, who had smashed through the wall. Subaru ran as fast as he could. He was thankful he hadn't accidentally come in a skirt. If the cause of death was cross-dressing, he would not be able to face the efforts of many of his predecessors. Forgetting to make a face at the last moment, Subaru kicked the floor as hard as he could. He caught up with Medium, and together with her, they walked out of the wall. Olbart, I'm sorry, but I've got work to do, too. Subaru, Kafnu a broken bar. At the same moment, an old man appeared as if from out of nowhere, interrupting Subaru and Medium in front of them, and a piercing hand shot out, striking them squarely in the chest. They were struck by the impact, and their breath caught in their throats. Subaru's consciousness cracked as he had taken a blow from the 9 divine generals, and he felt as if everything was going to shatter. But Medium, Natsumi-chan, I'm fine. Subaru, what? A loud voice called out right next to him, and Subaru regained the consciousness he had almost let go of. Looking down at his chest in a panic, he didn't see any damage from being struck by Olbart's piercing hand. There was no blood, nor was there any sign that his heart had been removed. Without bleeding, Medium, I'm coming. Natsumi-chan, don't bite your tongue, okay? Subaru, whose eyes rolled in confusion, had his collar grabbed by Medium, who said so boldly. She straddled over the broken wall she had reached with her big toe and threw herself out of the Red Rory castle without hesitation. Subaru and Medium leap out into the blue sky, entangled in each other, and the feeling of ascent from the leap is instantly drowned out, and a second later, they are thrown into the path of the fall. Subaru, Kaya, with a high-pitched scream, Subaru embraced Medium and rubbed his own hips. Then he pulled out the familiar feeling in his hand and held up his weapon, a whip, while in midair. If he had just jumped without any preparation, it would have been a mere suicide. It wasn't that he had many chances to win, but the stakes were high with Yorana's provocation, Vincent's declaration of war, and Kohuma and Olbart's attack. He had barely picked up on all of them, so he could only trust that he could pick up on the last one as well. Subaru, ouch, holding Medium's slender waist, Subaru swung his arm and unleashed the whip. The tip of the whip extended not into the void, but into one of the beams that stretched across various parts of the magical city, like spiderwebs all over the city. It reached one of the outer walls of Red Rory Castle. He hooked my whip to it and used it as a foothold to get out of the castle grounds. That was the best move Subaru could come up with in the confusion of the hall. Subaru, feeling a tug on his arm, Subaru wraps the whip around his wrist with all his strength. This way, even if his grip wasn't strong enough, at worst, he could support himself with the damage of shattering the bones in his wrist. All that was left was Subaru. Allies a broken bar. Geez, Al, I'm sorry. The moment the whip was taut, Al came crashing down furiously on Subaru's back. Apparently, he was able to jump out of the castle just like Subaru and the others. The three of them clung to each other and hung down, entrusting their weight of nearly 150 kilograms to the arm of Subaru. Subaru, go. The screams of the arms and wrists, elbows and shoulders, and the entire right arm were replaced by genuine screams as the bodies of Subaru and the others arced with one of the beams outside the Red Rory Castle as the fulcrum. The best thing to do is to wait for the recoil to subside and then, one by one, climb back up the whip to the beam. Subaru bit his back teeth as he compared the time it would take to get there to the necrosis of his right arm. Al Medium. Just as he was about to give it his all, Al and Medium's voices overlapped. Before he could even see what it was, the burden on his right arm disappeared. No, to be precise, the burden did not disappear, but the beam on which the whip was applied was snapped. It was the thorns extending from the breached walls of the keep, and their fierce mass. Subaru, with screams trailing behind them, Subaru and the three others flew through the air in a tangled mess. With the recoil of the whip on the beam, the bodies of Subaru and the others flew in a parabola. Although it was not as bad as jumping from the castle tower, if they were knocked down from a height of more than 20 meters, the physically normal Subaru and Al would not be able to survive. As they scream and search for a way out, the faces of Emiliere, Beatrice, and Rem come to mind one after another. Subaru, with a furious clatter, the three of them burst through the roof and tangled together, into the castle stables and their haystacks.